more interesting today to create a conversation between the past and the present through careful curation and through new commissions from living composers. Felix picked 2 piano works as a starting point for this record. The 6 Opus 126 Bagatelles by Beethoven, his last compositions for piano, and Ravel's piano cycle, Gaspard de la Nuit, famously one of the most difficult pieces ever composed. And then she approached a number of living composers and asked them to write new works inspired by the old ones. And the result is a really engaging journey through music that's both new and old, with Beethoven's bagatelles juxtaposed against the new pieces, like the one you just heard. And that contrast gives you a chance to listen with fresh ears and an open mind. And classical music has often fallen prey to the notion that context is meaningless, that music should be presented as a sacred artifact, without any context but a bare-bones concert hall. But gradually, that is changing, as classical musicians are finally realizing that, in fact, context is everything. That's what Felix is especially known for, incidentally. She collaborates with poets and weaves storytelling into her performances. She's a really neat character. She's even created an autobiographical recital/monologue. Very creative artist, Ina Felix. Here she is with one of the pieces she commissioned. This one is inspired by Undine from Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit. It's by the Italian-born New York composer Paola Prestini.
The Kosciuszko National Park have been the cause of division and debate for decades. When you look at the damage firsthand,
this is City News 660.
Doing the same job that
Dan, are there...
Rick McSwain from Network Travel.
Your situation or fact attendant, you should... First, the guys crashed the couch, got trapped...
Giving me a good reference because I'm going to have to start to look.
Sounds like she gave her employer a bit of an ultimatum there.
She did. She was being assertive about what she was looking for, and she was, in fact, prepared to give up her job and find a new one in Nova Scotia.
Do we know if this kind of thing is happening a lot? People wanting to move and then also take their jobs with them?
We don't know yet. However, we do know there are some major tech companies, including Google and Facebook, that have said employees can remain working from home after the pandemic, but it might affect their pay if they want to work remotely from further away, like if they want to move to Idaho from Seattle, for example.
Is this common in that industry? Are a lot of companies doing that?
It doesn't seem they all are. Some of the tech companies I've spoken to have said that you should get paid the same no matter where you live, and that's going to be key to helping them keep people with those hard-to-find skills. Labor economist Tony Bonin agrees.
There's no reason why your pay should be different depending on where you choose to live. If you live in an expensive city or a less expensive region or less expensive part of a city, for example, that's a personal financial choice. There's lots of reasons people might want to stay near family or be close to big city life or be in more remote areas. But if it's up to you, if it is your choice and it has no impact on the services you're providing, there's no basis for paying people differently just because of where you live.
That makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, if you live in an expensive city, like a Toronto or a Vancouver, aren't you now making more money?
Well, that's a good point, and it looks that is the way things shake out. And if an employee is required to live in Vancouver to come into that office physically there or somewhere like Toronto, there's an argument to be made for topping their salary up compared to their peers elsewhere. If you look at StatsCan data, there is clearly a difference in salaries depending on where you live. For example, if you look at the broad category that they call finance, insurance, and business admin, you'll earn around $44,000 per year in Saskatchewan and just over $60K in BC.
So what ended up happening to Alejandra? She had this dream of moving to Halifax. Was she able to keep her job?
Yes, she did, and she got to keep her salary.
So it was kind of smooth sailing.
Pretty much, but her employer did make a point of saying, just so you know, we would typically pay $20,000 to $30,000 less for someone to do your job in Halifax.
So they let her do it, but they weren't all that cool about it at the same time. They wanted to let her know.
They wanted her to let her know that she was lucky. That's what Alejandra thinks anyway. But these are uncharted waters for a lot of employers. COVID kind of forced issues of pay and location into the foreground, and they're just trying to figure it out as they go along. In Alejandra's case, she was lucky. It worked out for her and her company. Her husband Tyler was able to move his job too. Neither had to take a cut in pay. Will that be the case for everyone? Probably not.
But it did work out for Alejandra. So how's it going? How are they liking Nova Scotia?
They are loving it, Paul. They moved to Amherst in the Halifax area this past June.
I was just so fortunate. We have a community lake that we live like 3-minute drive away. It's so close to us. We can walk there in like 10 minutes. And we also have a pool in our own backyard. And we have a chicken coop that we plan on raising chickens in and having fresh eggs. If we want to go hiking, I can literally go hiking in my backyard. And yet we are still so close to everything like society.
That sounds pretty great. I'm a little bit jealous over here.
I'm a lot jealous, Paul. But you know what else is so great about their story?
Do tell.
That hard-working grandmother, there's a happy ending for her as well. Alejandra convinced both her parents to retire from the minimum wage jobs that they have worked most of their lives and join them in Nova Scotia too. This house actually has a coach house is what we call it. So it's about 1,000 square feet, a little house that's attached to our garage, and we have a shared laundry, and we connect back and forth. So the kids love it. They can just run over to, grandma and grandpa's, and well, they call them abuelita for Spanish, but yeah.
Abuelita and Abuelo in the backyard. Remote work for the win here.
Remote work plus all of that great Nova Scotia seafood, Paul.
I mean, who doesn't love a lobster roll? Thanks, Brandy.
Thanks, Paul.
That's the cost of living for this week. You can find links to our Facebook and Twitter on our show page, cbc.ca/cost of living. Follow our podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Google, CBC Listen app. The show is based in Calgary. Our producers this week are Danielle Nerman, Anissa Dari, Andrew Nguyen, Brandy Whiteley, and Jennifer Keane. Our executive producer is Tracy Johnson. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.
This is CBC Radio 1.
In the pouring rain, thousands of people press their point, an urgent message from the streets of Glasgow to the decision makers staying dry inside the climate talks. And at the front of the line, Indigenous people from Brazil, Peru, the United States, and Canada, carrying placards demanding their land back, demanding Indigenous rights and climate justice. And yet they aren't at the bargaining table. This week we hear how Indigenous peoples are taking action on climate and why decolonization is essential to keeping 1.5 alive. I'm Laura Lynch, and this is What on Earth from Glasgow. Breaks up. People mill about, not yet ready to leave each other's company. It's a gathering of Indigenous people, far away from the sight of the power brokers at the climate negotiations. Some wear colorful traditional dress, others wear what's needed to guard against the Glasgow chill. They're here to plot strategy, to promote solidarity, and to learn from each other. One man walks outside with me down a lane that is not always quiet.
My name is Edson Krenak. I'm from Krenak people in Brazil, Vanuidi clan. and I'm an indigenous activist, a writer, and also a teacher.
His homeland, Brazil, is thousands of kilometers away from this conference. But Krenak wants to tell me why he's come here, why he thinks coming to the UN climate meeting is crucial to the fight for indigenous rights around the world.
Is affecting primarily indigenous peoples, because indigenous peoples depend entirely on the nature, is where they live, where is their home. They have their food, their medicine, and the water. And speaking of water, for example, it's the first time in our history, for centuries, that in a country so rich of rivers and water, we are having water problems in our communities. The regions are close to Amazon forest, to the rainforest. We don't find our medicine plants anymore. Our herbs are disappearing completely without in front of our sight, our eyes, because there is no rain enough anymore. There's no animals, plants, birds, bees. They are not visiting us anymore. We cannot interact with them anymore because of the impact of climate change.
When you say problems with the water, what exactly do you mean? Lack of water, no drinking water?
Lack of water, no drink water, exactly. Drought, a lack of rain in areas that we used to have like every year the seasonal rain. Sometimes we have now 5 years without one drop of water. We know that the source of this, what is causing it, is in many places in the world, but especially in our own country, because for decades our governments